counted out. It will be scored as a knockout. Mills Lane counted him out to 10. It's all over. We've got a brand new heavyweight champion of the world, Mike Tyson, who can reign for a long, long time.
Boxing is one of the most famous contact sports in the world. In the middle of the last century, with the beginning of the era of television, boxing acquired the status of the most popular martial art in the world. In today's video, we are going to take a look at the history of boxing from the perspective of the best boxing fights, which had a huge, epic-making significance in the history of boxing. These are legendary fights that filled huge stadiums, grabbed the attention of hundreds of millions of spectators, and forever changed the history of boxing itself. If you enjoyed watching this episode on our channel, please click the thumbs up and subscribe to the world of boxing. Here, we grab a sense of nostalgia and recall the best fights in the ring, which go down in the annals of boxing history.
It's over. It's over.
Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
Unbelievable.
November 22nd, 1986, Las Vegas, Nevada. The young heavyweight sensation 20-year-old Mike Tyson, who made his professional debut just over a year and a half ago, enters a fight for the world title. Tyson has 27 wins with 25 knockouts, and 15 of them in the first round. The WBC title is at stake. His opponent is 32-year-old Trevor Berbick, for whom this is his first title defense since winning the title in March of 1986. In the boxing world, Berbick gained fame 5 years earlier when he became Muhammad Ali's last opponent. Ali himself was present during this fight and told Tyson to kick his ass for me. In addition to Ali, Archie Moore, Thomas Hearns, Hector Camacho, and two of Tyson's future rivals, Larry Holmes and Michael Spinks, were also present. All 8,800 tickets were sold for this fight. Tyson's fee was $1.5 million, and Berbick received $2 million. Tyson was not intimidated by the reigning champion in front of him, and from the very first seconds of the fight, he made his intentions known. Before the fight, Berbick said, "I will deal with him in 7 rounds." But Tyson set himself a goal of dealing with Berbick much earlier. It didn't help that Trevor himself greatly assisted Tyson with this task. Instead of moving and trying to keep out of his opponent's way, he stood right in front of Tyson, trying to prove that he could fight him head-to-head. But no one could fight head-to-head with the Mike Tyson of the mid-'80s. And soon, Berbick and his coaching staff and everyone who watched the fight became convinced of this fact. Mike shakes Berbick and almost knocks him down. However, Tyson does not rush his opponent, but acts in a style called controlled aggression. Berbick is in a dangerous position, but is saved by the bell. Berbick taunts Tyson, which is strange considering that he had almost lost the first round. During the break, panic reigned in Berbick's corner, and it is worth noting that for this fight, he had hired the famous trainer Angelo Dundee. And even if Berbick didn't understand his precarious position, the experienced Dundee was fully aware of what was happening. In Tyson's corner, Kevin Rooney, as usual in a calm voice, gave recommendations to his boxer. In the first seconds of the second round, starting with a powerful blow from the right, Tyson finishes what he started in the first. Berbick is on the floor but immediately jumps up, trying to show everyone that he is able to continue. But Berbick was far from okay. He was shocked and could not come to his senses. But at the same time, Tyson did not force a hasty conclusion and only attacked when he was sure of the outcome. Just over a half a minute before the end of the round, Tyson lands a right to Berbick's body, misses an uppercut, but then delivers a left hook that didn't look heavy, but it was. What happened to Trevor Berbick after that hit looked both comical and sad. Berbick still managed to get to his feet before the count of 10, but the well-known referee Mills Lane stopped the fight. and now the former champion can barely keep on his feet. When the great coach, Cus D'Amato, met Tyson, he told him, "Mike, you will become the youngest world champion in the history of the heavyweights." Those words were prophetic, but unfortunately, D'Amato did not see the triumph of his student. He died exactly 1 year before the victory. After the fight ended, his manager, Jimmy Jacobs, ran up to Tyson. The first thing Tyson asked him was, "You think Cus would have liked that?" At the age of 20 years, 4 months, and 22 days, Michael Gerard Tyson became the youngest world champion in heavyweight history, surpassing Floyd Patterson's record of winning the title at 21 years and 11 months.
Well, the moment I waited for all my life since I started the game of boxing. And as everyone said, that Berbick didn't have a chance. Berbick was a very tough, very strong. It's like very strong. I was never expecting him to be as strong like that. I knew he was strong, but I didn't expect him to be as strong as me. And he was very strong. But I was calm, and I was timing my punch. Every punch I threw with bad intention in a vital area. I was coming to destroy and win the heavyweight championship of the world, which I've done. And I'd like to dedicate my fight to my great guardian, Cus D'Amato. And I'm sure he's up there and he's looking and he's talking to all the great fighters and saying his boy did it.
He's smiling, that's right.
Did you feel that if you could show him you could take his best shot, that you would then be able to dominate him?
I would think that's probably what the game that I thought I could do, you know?
But was he a better puncher than you anticipated?
Yeah, he trained pretty hard because I felt it. It wasn't a one-shot knockout thing, but it was hard enough. And I said, well, I shake it for the second round.
Yeah.
And I said, I shake it for the second round. I said, he's going to come again, and I can kill his power. But apparently, I got caught, like Angela said.
Was he faster than you expected?
Well, pretty fast, I saw it, but, gee, you know, I still can't believe, but, you know, I was trying to force myself to believe.
July 18th, 1997, the unification fight in the super flyweight division. WBO world champion, 30-year-old Johnny Tapia, was pitted against IBF world champion, 23-year-old Danny Romero. The fight was supposed to take place in the Hilton Arena, but just 10 days before the bout, the owners of the arena refused Bob Arum's request for the fight. The reasons for this refusal were twofold. 2 weeks earlier, the second bout between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield had taken place in the arena at MGM Grand. The fight ended with Tyson's disqualification for a bite, which provoked many public brawls, including the MGM Grand Hotel lobby. Several casino gaming tables were also destroyed. Adding to this, both Danny Romero and Johnny Tapia were originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Both had Mexican roots. Within the state, this battle between Romero and Tapia was the main topic of discussion, pushing other events to the background. It got to the point that even street gangs began to clash over their preferences in the upcoming bout. Considering what happened after the bout between Tyson and Holyfield, and the fear that the Mexican criminal elements from New Mexico would come to Las Vegas, the owners of the Hilton decided they did not want to take the risk. Fortunately, the owners of another Vegas arena, the Thomas and Mack Center, came to the rescue, but precautions were still taken. All the spectators had to pass through a checkpoint, and the level of law enforcement was increased, even more so than other fights. The history of this confrontation began 16 years earlier. Romero and Tapia grew up in the same neighborhood and met when Romero was 7 and Tapia was 14. By that time, Johnny had already been boxing for 5 years and finally found a permanent coach, Danny Romero's father. At the age of 16 and 18, Tapia won the National Golden Gloves competition, and at the age of 21, in March 1988, he made his debut in the professional ring. In 2.5 years, Tapia fought 22 fights and became a real star in Albuquerque. But at the moment when Tapia was ready for big fights, his career was interrupted for 3.5 years. In 1990, he failed a cocaine doping test several times and was suspended from boxing. This period for Tapia became one of the darkest in his life. He could not box and struggled with addiction. Tapia was left without money, and for a while, he was homeless. In order to somehow return to normal life, he began making money in street fights. At that, these fights were not always fair. Sometimes rivals, realizing that a professional boxer was in front of them, tried to compensate for this advantage using weapons. But in the darkest period of his life, Tapia received a ray of hope. He met a girl named Teresa, who later became his wife and manager, but more importantly, a support in the fight against his inner demons. Tapia's return to the ring at the beginning of 1994 was due to Teresa. That year, Tapia fought 7 times and became the WBO World Champion. These frequent appearances in the ring are again because of his wife, because she understood that boxing was the best medicine for his addiction. By that time, the elder Romero had already completely focused on his son and had no time to train Johnny. Johnny understood and seemingly left without any conflict. He subsequently read comments made by the Romero family in the press, where they called him a drug addict and a bandit. Such behavior from people whom he considered family was an unpleasant surprise for him. Romero was entering this fight with 30 victories, 27 of which were won by knockout. It was an outstanding record for the super flyweight division. Many people thought that Romero's punching power would be a problem for Tapia, but Tapia answered by saying, "Every time Romero hits, I'll laugh." Romero responded, "Then you'll be laughing the whole fight." Knowing about their open hostility, the public expected to see a bloodbath. But what they received was a little different. The dynamics of the bout, the quality of the boxing, and the speed were of the highest level. Tapia behaved as an aggressive improviser. Winning the fight was his end goal, as well as pleasing the audience. Their rivalry was off the charts, and Tapia's answer to this was to be collected, self-confident, and follow a fight plan, keeping his motions under control.
So you better be careful. This guy is sizing him up for something big. Romero is sizing him up.
Tells you something about youth boxing in Albuquerque. Look at how well schooled both fighters are.
Both have an excellent left jab.
Best combination of this round for Ronnie. Continuing to counter inside as Romero comes at it. Romero trying to block that Tapia left hook with his right elbow, and Johnny nods for the crowd as he comes back to the corner.
Beautiful exhibition. These two fighters were made for each other. Johnny Tapia right now is fighting a very
starting to initiate some of these exchanges.
Well, he starts it with feeling here that he wants to win so badly that he's controlling the emotion.
One, you heard his dad telling him between the second and third rounds that he ought to dispense with the looping right. Tapia lands a hard right hand counter as the third round. All right, Oscar, number 13 against Hector Camacho.
I will be there and I will be ready.
On TVKO. Tapia lands a left hook to the body. Crowd going wild. Romero seeming to try to...
Romero played well for the first third of the fight, but it seemed like he was waiting to get in one hard punch, while Tapia came out exclusively to box that evening. As George Foreman noted, Danny Romero was still a very young boxer and did not seem to understand that fights like this cannot be won in the first 2 rounds, and you must be prepared for anything. Romero realized his mistake after 4 rounds, and in the 5th, he stopped waiting for one good punch and actually started boxing. The round was the first that Romero won on the cards. The success of his opponent discouraged Tapia a little, causing him to give up the 6th round.
And for the first time this round, we've seen Tapia's back hit those ropes by Tapia. Good counter right hand again by Romero. Have the power on it that he had in the first couple
Johnny was walking on the edge of a knife at the beginning of the 7th round. He missed a blow and decided to fake a knockdown. Fortunately, the referee realized that Johnny was playing, but he had every right to count it if he wanted to. Still, that was Johnny Tapia. This moment, however, seemed to wake Tapia up, and he gathered his strength. In general, the 7th and 8th rounds were very competitive, and no one would have been able to say who would win. Tapia hit more with higher accuracy. Romero hit less, but his punches were harder.
And he's taking Tapia out of his game. Shots like Las Vegas and Providence, Rhode Island.
1-2 combination. There it is again.
To the left hook.
After 8 rounds, it seemed like the audience would continue to see this high level of competition in the rest of the fight. However, there was a turning point in the 9th round. Johnny Tapia started pressuring Romero, and Danny was having trouble coping with the onslaught. The speed of the fight increased in the last 4 rounds, and it turned out that the 30-year-old Tapia was more comfortable at the frantic pace than was the 23-year-old Romero.
What Romero is starting to do now is making Tapia get his feet crossed together.
Johnny showed his sportsmanship there. Had a chance to Harold, you've got it 87-84 for Johnny Tapia.
Jim, I thought he had 2 good rounds in that 9. He boxed beautifully. This is what you want to tell a professional fighter. You want to give him...
Hard right hand by
And he's doing as much.
Great right. Tapia commanding the space in the ring. He's got his energy left. Both fighters tremendously conditioned with great stamina so far.
The 11th round was the real climax of the battle. If you want to show someone who Johnny Tapia was, turn on the 11th round of his fight against Danny Romero.
Hard left hook to the body by Tapia. Crowd trying to lift their man.
Oh, so not having to throw with energy, you got things in hand.
To do something dramatic to pull this fight out, which means at least a knockdown. And he doesn't look like he can get it.
Tapia leaving his hands down. Romero taking advantage to...
When the bell sounded at the end of the round, Tapia's true personality was shown. He saw that Romero was dazed and confused and tried to console him, despite the comments that the Romero family had made over the previous years. In the final round, Tapia won by unanimous decision. He had waited for this moment for 7 years to show that he belonged in the world of elite boxing. And when his chance came, he took it.
Put Tapia in trouble. Neither man has
Men have so much invested in this that they're almost, I don't know if they've let it all hang out.
He's got a chance now. If you want to win this thing, he should, while the other guy...
12 rounds of his career.
You remember, Jim, before the fight, I said,
2 boxers came together in this confrontation. For one of them, boxing was a profession. For the other, boxing was a way of life. One became a boxer because his father wanted it. The other became a boxer because nature wanted it. Tapia became the world champion and unified the WBO and the IBF titles that evening, and became a real success story. How a man with an incredibly difficult past managed to climb to the top. Just listen to the reaction of the audience when the winner is announced.
To the IBF and WBO Junior Bantamweight Champion of the World, Johnny Tapia.
Johnny Tapia fought with his inner demons all of his life. From the tragic death of his father and mother to his orphaned life on the street, he could have chosen the path of a criminal, but instead he chose to box. Despite everything that happened to him, he always spoke first about love, care, and the fact that people should support each other. Johnny boxed until he was 44, and then he worked with troubled teenagers in his free time.
first of all, don't stop me.
Jesus Christ, he gets his victory, but I've overcome everything, and I give all the thanks to the Lord Jesus Christ.
What won the fight for you?
Style, different movements. I have a good team on my side. I just listened to our game plan and I did it.
Have you ever fought such a disciplined fight from start to finish? And did you think you needed that to beat Romero?
I just did a lot of good things today. I had power, strength, and air, and I refused to go down. I refused to lose, and whatever he hit me with, it was not going to hurt me.
On May 27, 2012, at the age of 45, the former world champion in 3 weight divisions died of a heart attack at his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 2017, Johnny Tapia was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. In the middle of the 20th century, boxing rules dictated that title fights lasted no more than 15 rounds. American Floyd Patterson and Swede Ingemar Johansson fought for a total of 14 rounds, split across 3 fights. June 26, 1959, heavyweight world champion 24-year-old Floyd Patterson holds his 5th title defense. At the Helsinki Olympics in 1952, Patterson won the middleweight gold medal at the age of 17. He was coached to this success by the not-yet-famous Cus D'Amato. D'Amato taught Patterson the peekaboo style, which he then also successfully taught to Mike Tyson. Floyd had his first fights in the professional ring in the light heavyweight, but even then, D'Amato was aiming for a title in the heavyweight division. At the end of 1956, Patterson became the youngest world champion in heavyweight history. At the time of his victory over Archie Moore, Floyd was 21 years and 10 months old, an achievement that would later be surpassed by another one of D'Amato's students, Mike Tyson, who became a world champion 1.5 years younger. Patterson also became the first Olympic champion in boxing history to win the heavyweight championship. On May 1, 1959, Patterson defended his title for the 4th time by knockout in the 11th round. And 8 weeks later, he entered a mandatory fight against 26-year-old Ingemar Johansson. Up to this point, the Swede, who was a very popular fighter in his home country, had only fought locally, traveling no farther than Italy, Germany, and Denmark. His final qualifying match against Eddie Machen attracted 53,000 spectators. In those days, unlike modern boxing, it was not so easy to become a mandatory contender for a title, so those who had achieved this had certainly earned the distinction. For this, Johansson was considered a serious contender, but still, few people believed in his victory. Among 69 surveyed observers, 63 predicted a victory for the reigning champion. This was despite Johansson's title of European champion, his status as a mandatory challenger, and the fact he was recognized as Boxer of the Year in 1958. The first 2 rounds went smoothly. Patterson was active, but Johansson looked like he had everything under control and was just waiting for the right moment. Then came the 3rd and final round of this fight, though it would not be the last time these fighters would meet in the ring. A left hook and a right cross sent the champion to the canvas. At this time, the mandatory 8-count rule was not yet in force, so a boxer could get up before the referee resumed the fight. Patterson had not fully recovered from the knockdown when he got up and was engaged by Johansson, who struck Patterson again in the back of the head. Johansson's actions obviously deserve criticism, but boxing in those days was very cruel, and rivals did not spare each other. Patterson stood up, but immediately found himself on the floor 3 more times. After 4 knockdowns, it would seem that it was all over, but suddenly the champion gets up again, and instead of trying to survive, starts to battle with Johansson. Unfortunately, at this moment, Patterson was at a disadvantage due to his condition, and it was likely he would find himself on the floor a 5th time. It was still very far from the end of the round, and the champion's condition was critical. One can only marvel at how he endured for as long as he did. However, Floyd was never able to fully recover, and after an 8th fall, the fight was stopped. But it was not the end. It was only the beginning of one of the greatest trilogies in the history of professional boxing. 1 year later, on June 20th, 1960, at the Polo Grounds Arena in New York, in the presence of 32,000 spectators, a rematch took place. It was one of the highest-grossing fights of that time, bringing in a huge $3 million. Patterson's share of the earnings was $655,000, and Johansson received $520,000. Unlike the first fight, the Swede was now the favorite after winning the first match, and statistically, the odds were against Patterson. Up to this point, 8 former heavyweight world champions had tried to regain their belts after losing them. Among them were Jack Dempsey, Max Schmeling, Joe Louis, Ezzard Charles, and Jersey Joe Walcott. None of them succeeded. Despite the fact that Patterson started this fight aggressively, Johansson kept calm, waiting for the right moment, and then shook Patterson with a right cross. After that, Patterson took a moment and paused to recover, then attacked again. From that moment on, Floyd controlled the fight, and his peekaboo style gave Johansson great difficulties. Patterson effectively nullified Johansson's right hand, which was his strongest side. The 5th round begins. Johansson is no longer able to deal with Patterson, who attacks, getting closer and closer each time, and finally lands a left hook right on target. Johansson gets up, but then the real beating begins. He tries to withstand the attacks, but Patterson doesn't give him a moment to rest.
Now Patterson knows the title is there for the retaking.
Finally, delivering another left hook sends him into a hard knockout. So, in their second match, Floyd Patterson recovered from the defeat of the first bout and became the first heavyweight boxer in history who managed to regain a championship title after losing it. He was named Boxer of the Year for the second time in his career. The fight was named Fight of the Year, and the final round was the Round of the Year. At the time, the Knockout of the Year award had not been established, but if it had, it would have certainly gone to the winner of this evening. March 13, 1961. 9 months after their second meeting, the final chapter of the Patterson-Johansson trilogy took place. Before the third fight, Patterson, as before their first fight, was the favorite. But so far, the history of these two fighters had proven that the one who enters the fight as the favorite loses, so the outcome of the fight was not guaranteed. Patterson had slightly changed his approach in the second fight, and now it was Johansson's turn to try and surprise his opponent, and he succeeded. He started the fight aggressively, trying to force Patterson to retreat. Finally, Johansson's blows reached their target and sent Patterson to the floor. It was in this fight, for the first time, that the mandatory 8-count rule was tested. Patterson got up. After that, the fight began on a collision course, during which the American missed 2 successive incoming heavy blows from the left. Although he managed to stay on his feet after the first, the second incoming by Johansson led to another fall, Patterson's 9th in this duo's trilogy. It is said that it doesn't matter how many times you fall. The main thing is how many times you get up. This phrase probably suits this particular confrontation the best. Patterson then, with a left hook, sent Johansson to the canvas. Both fighters had found themselves on the floor in the previous matches, but for the first time, they both were knocked down during the same fight. Patterson decided not to tempt fate and did not go in to finish his opponent. The pace of the fight slowed, and after a few rounds, Johansson began to show signs of fatigue. The experience of the fighters also played an important role in this battle. Patterson managed to turn the tide of the fight when it was not in his favor, and Johansson was unable to respond.
can see that vicious left. He's a great combination puncher, Floyd Patterson. There you can see the speed of his hands. Much faster puncher than Johansson.
In the 6th round, the champion felt that the right moment had come and went on the attack, which became the finale in their rivalry. The referee stopped the fight, and afterwards Johansson complained to the referee that he had been too quick to end the fight. But apparently, Johansson had been down for a total of 11 seconds. This trilogy is rightfully considered one of the greatest in the history of boxing, and later Patterson and Johansson were inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Please do not forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any new episodes about the boxing legends of the past. See you next time.